Good morning, you're watching World News and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. Overnight, Donald Trump claimed that it is impossible for the Ukrainian president to have high approval ratings and called Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator without elections. Moreover, following a conference in Miami organized by the Saudi Arabian government, Trump said that Russia holds the cards when it comes to ending the war in Ukraine.
He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break. A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast. He's very upset that he wasn't invited. He could have come if he wanted to, but that he wasn't invited to Saudi Arabia. But he's been working for 3 years. There's never been even meetings or phone calls to stop this war.
I think the Russians want to see the war end, and I really do. But I think they have the cards a little bit because, you know, they've taken a lot of territory, so they have the cards.
Donald Trump should be taken seriously, but not literally, said Stephen Moore from the Ukraine Freedom Project in his interview with TVP World in response to comments made by the U.S. president on Wednesday.
Well, and I think that, you know, if you follow everything that Trump says and obsess about it, you will develop a dependency on anti-anxiety meds and good Polish vodka. And so take Trump seriously, but not literally.
How were Trump's words received in Ukraine? Were there any official comments? Is the nation rallying around their commander-in-chief? Our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Kataji, is trying to find the answers.
Yet another morning here in Ukraine following a busy night in the United States with more words coming from the US president directed at the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, there hasn't been an official reaction from Kyiv to those words as of yet. However, we have had lots of European leaders calling Zelensky, releasing public statements, expressing their support for the democratically elected leader of Ukraine and assuring Kyiv that their support for Ukraine is going to be maintained through this difficult period. Now, the U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, appointed by Donald Trump, Keith Kellogg, he is in Kyiv at the moment for discussions with the Ukrainian government. Now, it's unclear how those discussions are going to unfold with Donald Trump's words in mind. However, look, Kyiv still considers the US a very important partner, so it's going to be trying to maintain those relations no matter how strained the words between Donald Trump and President Volodymyr Zelensky get going forward. So we will continue to bring you more from this, and any reactions, official reactions that come from Kyiv, we'll be bringing you right here on TVP World. So it's Kataji reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
Overnight, President Zelensky commented on his Thursday meeting with U.S. envoy Keith Kellogg. In a video statement, Zelensky said it is crucial for Ukraine that discussions and cooperation with the United States remain constructive and lead to a lasting peace.
It is very important for us that the meeting and the work with America are constructive. Together with America and Europe, peace can be more achievable, and this is our goal. And most importantly, that this is not only our goal, but a shared goal with our partners, especially on the eve of the third anniversary of the start of this war, a war that we in Ukraine wanted to end from the very first second.
Russian forces once again launched a drone attack on the South Ukrainian city of Odesa last night. As per the city's mayor, the strike wounded one person and caused significant damage to local infrastructure.
The strike marks the second consecutive night of drone attacks for the residents of Odesa. In the aftermath, fire broke out on the roof of a warehouse building and a 55-year-old woman was wounded, requiring hospitalization. The attack also left some 5,000 people in just one of Odesa's districts without power. Overall, the 2 days of strikes resulted in nearly 90,000 households losing electricity. Meanwhile, Russian drones attacked Kyiv. Local authorities of the Ukrainian capital reported that a downed Russian drone crashed in the city. So far, no damage or casualties have been reported.
On Wednesday night, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said a forced capitulation of Ukraine would mean a capitulation of the entire West. Posted on social media, Tusk's comment came after the American president echoed Russian propaganda, calling his Ukrainian counterpart a dictator.
A forced capitulation of Ukraine would mean a capitulation of the whole community of the West, with all the consequences of this fact, and let no one pretend that they don't see this.
The Pentagon has been told to identify budget cuts totaling $50 billion that could fund a refocus on American military priorities to secure its southern border and protect Asia-Pacific interests. Military leaders will draw up a list of potential cuts from the 2026 budget that could be redirected towards President Donald Trump's priorities for national defense. The review would allow Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to follow through with goals to invest more in the Asia-Pacific and prioritize securing the U.S. border with Mexico. Last week, Hegseth said the Pentagon's priorities should be China and U.S. border security rather than security of Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer are expected to travel to Washington, D.C. early next week, according to U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. This visit comes as relations between Europe and Washington are tense over negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. Earlier this week, representatives of Washington and Moscow agreed to begin talks on ending Russia's war in Ukraine. European and Ukrainian delegations were not invited to sit at the negotiating table. Following these talks, Emmanuel Macron held 2 emergency summits on Ukraine with European and NATO representatives. Out of European leaders, only UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has recently stated that he would consider deploying British troops to Ukraine. British Defense Secretary John Healey met his Norwegian counterpart near the country's border with Russia. While in Kirkenes, Healey said Europe must bring Ukraine to the strongest possible position for peace talks and put maximum pressure on Vladimir Putin. Speaking from what Healey called NATO's front line, the British official warned that the administration in Moscow is a threat well beyond Ukraine. Healey's visit came a day after Russia and the United States held the first round of talks on how to end the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian and European governments were not invited to the Saudi capital, furthering concerns that Russia and the U.S. might cut a deal that ignores European interests.
Our concern as defence ministers is that we're not jeopardising the peace by forgetting about the war. And our job as defence ministers is to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position going into any talks. And that means continuing to step up the military aid that we in Europe, alongside we argue to the States, needs to be maintained, because the maximum pressure on Putin is going to mean the maximum chance that he will negotiate seriously.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is on his way to Slovakia. The visit comes amid changes in the Slovakian political landscape.
On Wednesday, 3 parties of Slovakia's ruling coalition agreed to reshuffle the government in a move boosting the strength of Prime Minister Robert Fico's Populist Party. Since the end of 2024, Slovakia has been seeing anti-government protests, primarily opposing Robert Fico's pro-Russian policies. While in the country, Rutte will meet with the President of Slovakia, Petr Pellegrini, and the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, Robert Kaliňák. Rutte and Pellegrini will hold a joint press conference following their meeting. During the visit, the Secretary General will not meet with Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico. Rutte will also address the troops of NATO's forward land forces stationed in Lest.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and the leader of the CDU, Friedrich Merz, took part in their final debate before the snap elections set to be held in Germany on Sunday. Surprisingly, the 2 front-runners for the Chancellor's office shared some common ground on migration policy.
We have to solve 2 major problems in this country in the next 4 years. That is migration and the economy. And if we don't solve these 2 problems, then you and we and all democratic parties in the political centre will not be facing the next change of government in the 2029 federal elections, as we will finally slide into right-wing populism. And I'm standing here to avoid exactly that. And that's why the answer is very clear. I will only sign a coalition agreement that includes includes a turnaround on migration and a turnaround on the economy. Perpetrators must be severely punished, and if they have committed such offences and do not have German citizenship, then they must certainly expect that we will return them to another country, return them to their country of origin, and that we will use all measures and pull out all the stops to make this possible.
The remains of 4 hostages held by Hamas, one of them a dual Polish-Israeli citizen, have been returned to Israel. The bodies were transported to Khan Yunis, where they were placed in Red Cross vehicles. The organization will bring the bodies to Israel troops stationed in Gaza for a short religious ceremony. The 4 bodies include a mother and 2 children whose fate had been unknown since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7, 2023. The 4th body is that of a 84-year-old veteran peace activist, Odesa, who held both Polish and Israeli citizenship. It marks the first time Hamas has handed over dead hostages since the ceasefire began last month. Their return sparked comments from Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israeli prime minister said that the heart of the Israeli nation is torn and added that the country is dealing with monsters. After the short ceremony with Israeli soldiers in Gaza, the 4 coffins will travel to the Abu Kabir Forensic Institute for identification. The Vatican says Pope Francis, who is being treated in the hospital for double pneumonia, is in stable condition and that his blood tests have shown a slight improvement.
Catholics around the world have been praying for the 88-year-old pontiff. Pope Francis was admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital on February 14th due to breathing difficulties. In Buenos Aires, where Francis grew up, the Archdiocese has urged all churches in Argentina to conduct masses for his swift recovery.
We always have faith in God, Jesus and Mary for the Pope. We pray for him and we pray that God's will is done.
We always put him in our intentions, but what we can also do is put him in our prayers and offer fasting, or in some cases, penance.
He's being treated for double pneumonia, a serious infection that can inflame and scar both lungs and makes breathing more difficult. On Wednesday, the Vatican stated the Pope's condition was stable and that recent tests had shown an improvement.
And with that update on Pope's health, we end our service, but please do stay tuned back here on TVP World with more news and features in just a moment.